Brenda, you were a part of some amazing sitcoms. How I Met Your Mother, After Party, Disjointed, Sullivan Son. And then you moved on to co-writing a Pixar film. Can you describe some of the challenges going from your sitcom life to this other world of animated, massive world building, and children's comedy?
It was a big transition in the sense that obviously it's a much more visual medium, and like a lot of these Pixar movies are actually kind of action movies with a character-driven heart.
They are.
But like for me, what was so great is coming from the TV world and half-hour comedy, you have this writer's room of writers, and it's very collaborative, and that really set me up to succeed at Pixar because you're working with their story artists there, and they're kind of like your writer's room. They're visual storytellers that you work with, and you have to, listen and harness their ideas and steer the ship in a way that's very similar to being in a room or running a room. So that really helped the transition.
I would like to welcome to all our listeners Brenda Hsueh, a versatile and imaginative storyteller whose writing journey encapsulates the essence of creativity and adaptability in the entertainment industry. Brenda began her career with a focus on multi-camera sitcoms, contributing her writing talents to renowned shows like How I Met Your Mother, After Party, Disjointed, and Sullivan Son. Her transition from sitcoms to animation showcased her ability to weave narratives that resonate across different mediums. Brenda's role as a co-writer for Pixar's Elemental was a masterclass in balancing comedy and drama. In today's episode, we'll explore Brenda's unique journey through the realms of television and animation, diving into her creative process, the evolution of her storytelling voice, and her insights on the art of writing. Join us as we unravel the story behind the storyteller, Brenda Hsueh, and discover what makes her narratives captivate and enchant audiences worldwide. This episode was brought to you in partnership with Little Black Tux. Little Black Tux is my go-to when I need a timeless look. Whether I'm speaking on a film panel, walking a red carpet, or need a bold, sophisticated look for a photo shoot, Little Black Tux has me covered. Little Black Tux isn't just a clothing company, they're a company with a story, a strong why. And you know I love a good story. They're breaking boundaries and creating clothing that empowers women with versatile, upscale options. I love my Little Black Tux, and I know you will too. Brenda!
I like enchant.
You are enchanting. Your stories are definitely enchanting. Tell me about where you grew up. I read that it was in Edmonton. Is that correct?
Oh, no, I grew up in Long Island, actually.
Long Island?
Yeah, New York. It's a suburb, a very boring suburb of New York, yeah.
And are you from a family with siblings?
Yeah, I have an older sister. My parents were born in China. They were I'm first generation, and yeah, they came to New York and met there and moved to Long Island, and that was where I grew up. But it was like there were not a lot of Asian kids where I grew up. It was very Italian, very Jewish. And so we were definitely a minority, and my sister and I, we would just kind of have to be each other's, our only friends were each other, because she's only a year older than me.
I get that.
And so together we kind of would, we created this world when we were young called Dollyland.
I love it.
Which was basically all our stuffed animals, and
yes.
we gave every stuffed animal a character and like a story arc. And my sister would always say that she was the mayor and I was the vice mayor. Mm-hmm. And I was like, even at like 6, I was like, that's a made up. I'm like, that's not a thing. Vice mayor isn't a thing. That is a made up position. But it was what I'm looking, it's so funny because like we would just do that all day, is like play pretend and like come up with stories and be creative with these characters and these stuffed animals. And now I'm like, oh my God, I do this for a living, except instead of stuffed animals saying my lines, I have like humans saying my lines. So
I wonder what it is about that. Like for me too, I have 2 younger sisters, and we spent every waking minute in a make-believe world as children. And I sometimes wonder, was that just me because of where you and I ended up telling stories for a living? Yeah. Or was this something that all kids just like live in imagination and then lose later on in life? And I really for me, I really remember our parents immersing us in a story. And I think that was one of the reasons why we became so enchanted with the worlds that we could make up.
Well, I think my parents were just more like both working and kind
Yeah?
of, no, probably neglectful, but it gave us a lot of time we basically had to entertain ourselves. And so, yeah, we created, and they were like frugal Asian immigrants, so we never had toys or, things like that. So we had our imagination. That's free. And so, and they also were down to take us to the library. So it was like books that feed that, and then, yeah, we would just come up with our own stories and characters and all that. And so they say that like what you should be doing in life is what you were doing when you were 5.
I talk about this all the time on this podcast. Literally, yeah. I couldn't agree more.
And I never put it together, but looking back, I'm like, oh my God, I am doing what I was doing at 5. Like, and I don't think everybody is that way.
No.
I think kids play, I think there's a lot of imagination with kids, but I definitely think maybe because, yeah, there's a reason we're in the industry we're in because we were so into it, like as kids.
I do believe that like some people, have the blessing of finding their way back to that childhood self, and some don't, and neither is a wrong path.
Right.
But I wish often that society wouldn't cloud our natural instincts and judgment.
Oh yeah, totally.
So
I mean, then you get all the pressure from your parents, like what you should do when you internalize that, and then you kind of forget like what was your true love when you were 5. Mm-hmm. And honestly, sometimes I think some people don't have that. So, and that's okay too. Like, I don't think everybody has something like that.
Yeah.
But I do think it's great when, if you do, you manage to also like make that your career.
Talk to me about those early stories and music that kind of inspired you, and if there's a moment where you kind of, as a kid at least, really fell in love with stories.
I mean, I think my earliest exposure, because I think my Asian parents didn't technically let me watch TV, even though they both worked, and so they couldn't really police us. They would be working, and we were latchkey kids, and then we would come home and just like, I'm like, you're not here to not, we would like watch TV and then look out the window and make sure that, and then when they came home, we would just turn it off. I'm like, there's no way you can stop us. But before we did that, we would read. And so I think a lot of this, like, Wrinkle in Time and like, these classic books that got me thinking, and then Little Mermaid and
of course,
and cartoons, even just like after school cartoons, like and Saturday morning cartoons, like that was like my first introduction, I think, to story as a kid. And
me too.
Yeah.
Me too. We used to wake up and we used to cheat our mother by getting up before her and like sitting and watching the extra hours of TV because we had to highlight the hours that
you
we
had
were
a
allowed.
log?
Yes, you were supposed to highlight the hour you wanted to watch, and then you had to finish the chores. And if you finished the chores, then you get to read, watch that hour.
Amazing.
Reading, we were allowed to do,
right.
But I had a flashlight because there was lights out time. You had to like read underneath the covers.
I kind of love this system where you you have to earn your watching hours.
Maybe
by
that's
doing
why
chores.
we value it so much. They were shaping us.
Yeah. Well, little did they know that I would go into TV.
Yeah.
So they probably thought I was wasting time, but actually it turned out to be research.
Tell me about what you initially wanted to do when you graduated.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, I was an English major and I was on the East Coast, and most people went to New York City, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I did know that like it would involve writing in some way, because I was like, that was my major, and I was like, okay, I think that's a skill set that could take me to into a lot of different industries and stuff. And so actually, this is kind of random, but I was almost going to go into like television news. Like
television news.
Yeah, like as an associate producer, not like on camera, but like, so I like interned at like 2020 when I was a junior in college, and then I had a job lined up at MSNBC actually to work as an associate producer in New York, and I was going to go down that route. But honestly, like being in that world, I almost was like, this is journalism, but it almost is more entertainment, and I was like, or it was like entertainment disguising itself as journalism, and in a way, I was like, why don't I just cut out the facade and just do the entertainment, like not try to pretend to be news. And I started thinking that way, but I didn't put my finger on it, but I was getting a little disillusioned with it. And but what happened is that, so I graduated, and what happened is my parents were separated, and my mom moved out to LA basically she got diagnosed with cancer, and so she wanted to be with her family, and her family was in basically Pasadena, San Marino area, which is LA suburb. And in the better weather and all this stuff, and so as an immigrant kid, I was like, I gotta go
to California,
gotta go to give up everything and take care of my mom.
Yeah,
and so,
of course.
you know, I gave up that job. I gave my boyfriend, all my friends. I moved out to LA being like, I guess I'm doing this. I'm taking care of my mom. And I felt very derailed. I was like, why am I here? I don't know anybody. And, you know, it actually weirdly worked out because if I didn't come out to LA, I wouldn't have, you know, even, because the thing about LA is once you're here, you inevitably meet somebody in the industry.
Absolutely.
And so I did meet somebody at an alumni event, and he used to write for Seinfeld.
Okay.
And we just hit it off. He thought I was funny. He was like, hey, why don't you try writing? And to me, I was like, I guess as an immigrant kid, that just never seemed like a real option. Like being a like writing for Hollywood.
So I actually I hear you on picking the journalism path.
Yeah.
I actually did the same thing. I was almost supposed to go to Hofstra for broadcast journalism. I think I was trying to
be pragmatic.
Be pragmatic.
Mm-hmm.
I think I was trying to. By the way, my parents have always been super supportive, but I think as all people of Asian background or South Asian background, like there was this, you need a B plan, you need to make sure that you have something just in case this doesn't work out. And I'd broken my knee at 15, I was going to be going to musical theater, and so then they were like, okay, find something, like you can still pursue the arts, but find a backup. So I had created this, it would be okay if I went into broadcast journalism because that was, you know, somehow established. And before that, when I went to film school, I wanted to be a National Geographic filmmaker. And that was, again, like there was something like educational.
Yeah, it's sort of like being an architect versus an artist. Like people are like, oh, I'll be an architect because it's a sensible artist.
Yeah,
you know
it's
what I mean?
a sensible artist.
You know, like I think journalism is our way of being like, I'll be a writer, but a sensible writer.
So tell me, you meet the individual who wrote for Seinfeld,
and he was just like, why don't you try writing? And for the first time, I was like, it kind of clicked that I'm like, this could be a real job. And he explained like, oh, write a spec and all this stuff. And it's actually kind of the perfect, writing is kind of the perfect thing to do when you're taking care of your mom. There's no startup costs. You just do it at home. Like in my mind, I'm like, okay, I have the time now. Let me try this. And so I kind of gave myself 2 to 3 years to break in. Like, I was like, that's like grad school. And at least I'm not paying tuition. I'm just supporting myself.
Yeah.
And so I was like a very sensible Asian. I'm like, I'm not going to toil away forever. I'm going to give myself a certain amount of time to like get my first break.
I think there's actually something to that, by the way. When people give themselves a time frame and they're like, I'm going to do it in this time frame, I do believe that you manifest into reality. When I gave myself a time frame when I was struggling as a filmmaker, it was when I had my first success. When I was kind of like, okay, this is it.
Yeah.
Go all the way.
Right.
Otherwise, you got to go find something else for a while at least.
Yeah, I fully think it's a very disciplined and also motivating, as you said.
Yeah.
And so I basically taught myself, like I picked half hour, honestly, because it was the shortest and I'm lazy. And I'm like, oh, it must be the easiest. It's actually the hardest because you have to do like story, stakes, character, and be funny and do it all in like 22 minutes, which is like so efficient.
It's so efficient.
It's so tight. Like it's everything is either be story or a joke. And it's just like it's a very difficult art form, I think. And
did you watch a lot of multicam growing up?
Not just multicam, but I love comedy. I love half-hour comedy. I love The Simpsons. I love like South Park and all that stuff growing up, and not just animated, but like Friends growing up and everything like that. So I'm a fan of comedy, and I did pick it because it was the shortest. But I mean, then I basically just taught myself. There were all these websites where they transcribed every single episode of Friends or every single episode of Seinfeld, and I would just read every single one and be like, I'm going to read good examples of what I want to do. And then I did that, and then I would just start writing and trying to write scripts after script and like getting better and better. And after 2 years, I was like, I think my craft has gotten to the place where I think this is a good script. Now I have a good spec script, but like, how do I get a job? And at the time, I didn't have any connections, and I didn't even know how to get a.
Well, you have the guy from Seinfeld.
I'm also like terrible. I don't know. This is like my stoic Asian dad was always like, never rely on. I learned a crazy level of self-reliance, and that's very hard for me to ask for help. I'm like terrible at asking for help. So I was like, no, I'm never going to ask for a job. I'm like, I'm going to have to earn it myself. But
I think it's really interesting that you created your own career path, and in that scrappiness of learning everything on your own, I think there's also a value that's put on your journey, and it helps create that inspiration and the intention and that drive. And we have tons of interns that come in from all kinds of film schools, and I love them dearly, but I love also re-educating the drive within each of them, because I think so many formal educations kind of, you get this idea that you're going to graduate and there's going to be this job for you, and like you got the great college degree behind your name. And I think there's something else to sitting down and learning from the masters and wanting it so badly that you're willing to spend the time finding out what your voice is.
Yeah. No, it was a very it was a real learning period. And but you're right, like then I was like, how do I get a job? Like how do I don't know how to get a PA job, I don't know how to get a writer's assistant job, I have no contacts. So then I did just I'm like, I guess I'll enter a contest.
Oh, no way.
Mm-hmm,
I did not read about this.
Well, you know, these studios have, like, it was basically the Disney ABC Writing Fellowship.
I love that.
And, you know, Warner Brothers, I think, has one. But, I mean, as an Asian immigrant, I was like, I need to support myself. Like, a lot of them don't pay. And Disney is the one that actually pays you for the year. And I was like, that's the one I'm going to apply for. And it is very competitive, but it's a great program. And so I applied, and I remember saying to myself, I'm like, if I get it, great, and if not, I'm moving on. Like, I'm gonna figure out something else out. I'm gonna do another thing in my life. Or whatever.
Consistently did this with yourself. I would beg to argue that that's one of the reasons for your success.
Maybe
I
don't know,
think
do or
so.
die. So anyway, but then I got it, and it was great, and that was the first time I applied, and I got in, and it not only gave me time, a year to work on my writing, but I was able to get on a show through them. Like I worked on a show there, and then I got an agent, and then
the Disney family.
Yeah, and it was like my foot in the door, and I'm eternally grateful.
And then, I mean, we're gonna get there, but then you ended up back with Pixar, which I know that's kind of crazy.
Crazy.
Let's talk about multi-camera sitcoms.
Yeah.
That format. Mm-hmm. You spoke a little bit in our introduction about how that experience has helped shape your narrative style, your character development, plot construction. I would love to delve into it a little bit more because we talked briefly about how it helped you with collaboration because you're so used to writers' rooms. But I would love to know, honing your craft on those 30-minute comedic pieces, let's call them. How does that change when you go into more long-form format, the way you approach character and plot?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, a multicam is especially a specific, within half-hour comedy, multicam is very different even from, you know, single cam, like Malcolm in the Middle. And so I feel like a multicam, it's almost this like lost art. It's like tap dancing. Like not many people know how to write a multicam anymore. And it is a dying breed, and it is an art form, and it is very joke driven. It's like a play. It's more like a play. It's shot like a play, and it's rhythm and the dialogue. It's very, very dialogue, joke driven. And there's something I really appreciate when it's well done. Like it's like, well, obviously when it's bad and hacky, it's kind of terrible. But when it's great, like a Frasier, or like, you know what I mean,
like watching a
or
symphony.
Friends, or you know, and How I Met Your Mother was shot like a multicam, even though there wasn't a live studio audience. So the rhythm, like, it was such a great training ground. Like as I said, like the kind of just even the forcing you to just be a joke machine, like, because it's not just you can't just end a scene on a quirky little moment, you know what I mean? Like, it has to have a blow, like a hard joke, and I really appreciate that, like the skill to do hard jokes. Like, and as I said, I feel like it's a bit of a dying art because like not many people are doing it or training in it anymore, and I don't want that to go away.
If someone wanted to get really good at multicam sitcoms, I know what I would do. But what would you recommend? I would recommend, I mean, as someone who's touched these different formats, I'd recommend improv.
Yeah, a lot of writers do improv because being in a room is a lot about yes and improv and that was actually a big adjustment because when I was learning, it was me alone in my room writing jokes, writing scripts and stuff, and then the transition to being in a writer's room and having to pitch. Before I'd hear a joke and write it. And now I'm like, oh no, I have to sell it in the room. Now I'm a performer. And I have to do it in the voice of like whatever character. Like, you know, like I remember I was writing for a show for Tracy Morgan, and I was like having to do a Tracy Morgan impression. like you know, I to sell the joke. Like that was a big transition, is like learning how to be a writer solo to learning how to be in a room and how to sell the joke. But
that's one of the reasons I hate labels in our industry, because if you've truly been part of the collaborative process of creating a film, creating a television show, for the musicians we have on here creating music, that collaboration involves us to wear all the hats at some point, all right? There's no way you go in writing without thinking through a director's lens, because you're going to have to work with that director talent. From the production standpoint, you know, you have to understand how all these things are operating. Otherwise, how can you also understand how your cog fits in the wheel? And like when we write, we're acting out every single scene. So like in many ways, you're also a performer. So I hate, one of the things I'm allergic to is just like labeling myself or others, because I just think that like if you're in this art form, then you're truly in the art form, which means wearing all the hats.
Right,
sometimes.
It's very multidisciplinary and stuff. But like to just answer your original question about transitioning from that half hour, like I'm so grateful for training in that, because I feel like I learned also like writing for another show, for a show, you have to write in the voices of these characters.
Yeah.
And that's a real skill. I think it's so funny because today's writers and young writers are coming up to be like, write your pilot, write your story, write your voice, which is great. But also like there's a skill to writing someone else's voice and, and having the empathy to write someone that's not you. And like, I'm so glad I weirdly started too strongly in that camp, like where I was never writing about myself. And back then, being Asian, you couldn't write about yourself. That was not, no one's buying an Asian sitcom back when I started. You know what I mean? Like, you know, 15 years ago. So now we're in a world where I can write about myself, you know, and it was so funny because I would come up with like stories or premises for shows that were based on my life, but I'd be like, oh, but no one's gonna, like I wanted to write a sitcom about, a show about my dad and my relationship with my dad, because he's a Chinese dad and wanted a son, but got 2 daughters, and basically raised us to be like Asian stoic men, like himself, and like to be super like robotic and self-sufficient and like a badass. But like, I was like, oh, but I can't do it about my Asian stoic dad or intense Asian dad. I'm like, oh, but I can make him like a intense stoic CIA dad. And that's how and he raises his daughter to go into the CIA and be a robot and be like basically a professional killer. So I basically was like hiding, like it was like, oh, I'll do this thing that's grounded in my reality, but like I'll make him a CIA dad.
I don't know if it's hiding though. I think that's like helping others understand the perception through a fully different lens. And I think that's part of the reason why we're drawn to this industry, because I want to see the world through other people's eyes. Like that was what loving story was all about, was trying to understand what my Korean, what my Japanese, I grew up all around the world, so what my Indian, what these people saw through their eyes. I remember one of the things that used to keep me up at night was like, did my mom dream in Hindi? Like I could, like this concept that she had grown up with a totally different language and then she speaks English to me all the time. I would just constantly try to put myself in that, like in her shoes. Like what is it like to dream in another language and then speak English? And you know, little things like that, that perception, curiosity is what creates great characters.
Fully. I think being a writer has really taught me, and I think if you're going to be a good writer, I think great writers have to have a really amazing sense of empathy and like putting yourself in, because if you're writing a character that's not you, like being able to really sell that and make that a grounded real person is such a skill. And I also think reading fiction is important to teach people empathy. Like you're basically, anytime you watch a movie or read a book about someone else, like it's like, oh wow, that's what it's like to be a black kid in Atlanta, like trying to be hustling to make whatever, and you're like seeing what it's like to be somebody else basically. And it's kind of so important. I think it's actually really important. That's why fiction, I think it's like,
that's why we do the job.
Well, it's part of the reason, I think.
I just think that the film and TV can transcend, you know, cultural, socioeconomic bounds and boundaries, to create such understanding.
Yeah,
globally.
Hopefully.
Let's talk about Elemental. When you're working with a group on a project of that magnitude, you're talking about how you've shared your voice in other spaces. How do you share your voice within that collaboration? What was that process like? You walked into a treatment, you walked into an idea, you walked into a concept. Walk us through it.
Yeah, it was actually I met with the director, Peter Son, who's amazingly talented, and he basically interviewed me for the job. He came to me with, he already kind of had the world, which I feel like is so unique, and blew me away because I'm like, oh, it's so rare when you hear of an original concept that you've never seen before.
100%.
I'm like, oh yeah, people made of fire, literally made of water, people made of earth, like I've never seen that, and that's also such a visual. I also love that it was like, this is why this needs to be animated. You know what I mean? Because you're like, oh, I get it, you know? And so he had the world, and the theme of like, kind of like, thanking our immigrant parents, you know, and that really resonated with me, being first gen. And then also the fact that he wanted it to be a romance, like between fire and water, this kind of metaphor for an interracial couple. And I just love doing stuff that you haven't seen, and Pixar hadn't done a romance ever. Like they're always like buddy comedies.
That's insane.
Yeah, they're always like kind of buddy comedies.
They did a movie about death before they did a movie about romance.
Yeah, I think, and so I was like, it's high time. I'm like, oh my God, Pixar needs to do a romance.
Absolutely.
And so those elements were there, and it really sold me. I'm like, sign me up. Like, I want to help you like break the story and figure out who these characters are and their arcs, and like, and what this is, and the structure of it all.
So now you're sitting down, and were there 5 of you?
No, actually, the first year, I want to say it was like almost exclusively my director and I just brainstorming.
Okay.
Like literally, and just like me like downloading all his like personal stories with his family and his life, and because a lot of these stories, movies draw from the director's personal stuff, and it's almost like you're like a therapist. You're like just trying to get the juicy, interesting, compelling stuff and elevate it to a narrative. You know what I mean? And so. Yeah, that first year was because it was a lot of talking, brainstorming, and breaking different versions of the movie. And then once we got approved on like the structure and the outline, then story artists started joining up and like, you know, helping us execute on a more.
Tell me about, because one of the most important things, I think, especially in these studio blockbusters, Pixar movies, Disney movies, and the thing that sets a film apart and that set Elemental apart is blending drama and comedy. And you guys did it very seamlessly in this movie, but there's definitely movies in both those libraries that we can point out where, you know, the comedy didn't quite sit and you don't find yourself as enthralled or as attached to the characters. Tell me about blending drama and comedy.
I think that's so important, because I feel like even in life, like when life is so tragic, there's always some humor. And I really, my pet peeve is when I watch serious movies that are humorless and like relentlessly humorless. And I'm like, that's not life. Like even when you're going through horrible stuff, like, and you need the foil, you need the contrast to make both the drama and the comedy pop. Like, so I feel like I really, that's something that's very important to me, and I think to execute it well, and I think the reason Pixar does it well, and we were able to do it well, is that the humor has to be inherent in the characters and in the premise and in the world. And so what's so great about Elemental is there's so much built-in comedy in being a fire person navigating a world and accidentally setting something on fire, or like a water person trying to kiss a fire person. There's just this built-in like just comedy and stakes. You're like, oh my God, are you gonna die? Like what's gonna happen? You know, so there's that, and also just like building your characters and your premises to have comedy baked in. So it's not like you're just adding some joke. The joke is like
it's part of the
fabric of exactly. It should, like, the joke should come because you've set up the situation and these characters in a way that there's going to be comedy.
Do you go back and you still punch up places that need more humor? Or do you find that it very naturally, because you've woven it into the entire story, just serves itself?
I think if a scene is working correctly and set up correctly, the comedy should be organic to it. You know, like you don't want to just be like I think some of these, they just put like some pop culture reference or they make a funny joke, and it's like, I love a character-driven joke. Like, it's like, this joke only is funny given who this character is and in this situation. Like, it's very specific to like what this is. And like, sometimes the scene needs to be rewritten to create that situation. Sometimes you're like, why isn't this funny, and why is it so hard to find the jokes? You're like, oh, maybe because what their goals are. Like, we need to change, we need to re-examine what this scene should be.
I love that. So you rewire the entire scene. I think it's an important thing for people to hear. They say when you pull one thread of a script that you unravel all the way through it. So it's kind of important to make sure that thread is continuous, otherwise you're going to be starting from page 1 all over again. Can you share in your career, did you have a pivotal moment or a pivotal event in your storytelling experience that really created your I don't know, that you remember as an obstacle or something that really pushed you to this next like level of writing?
I think so. I think I was speaking to it a little bit earlier, which is that my earlier days, I fully like would write on other people's voices, other characters. I really like, I never wrote anything personal, really. Like, and I think that changed. The pivotal moment was like, I was on a show, and you know, you're writing for a showrunner and you're trying to write in their voice, and I just wanted to do my own thing creatively. So I gave myself an outlet, like outside of work, to write on a feature. I wrote a feature spec, basically, a spec script, where I was like, I need a creative outlet where I am in charge, and I, you know, because obviously on a show you're servicing a showrunner and that's the job. But I was like, I want to be able to be like, I think this is good. It's going in, like, and this is just purely something that for me and that is personal and not like these other characters that were
so
created.
Important.
So yeah, that was when I wrote that movie. It was kind of like, it's basically kind of an Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. It was based on my first longest relationship, and it was the most personal thing that I had written, and it's what got me the job at Pixar, basically.
Wow.
Like, this script was very well received and like passed around town because people just liked reading it.
But it didn't get made?
No, and that's what I'm working on.
Should
actually.
we make this
No,
movie,
I know.
guys?
I'm actually.
I feel like we should make this movie.
You're right, and I now have a producer, and I want to direct it. So
I love
that would
that.
be. It's like my directorial debut.
Yay!
And so yeah, I mean, it's been a long saga, but I finally came to a place of like, I want to do this. I want to make this happen.
I love that. I'm so excited. You
Yeah.
have to let us know how we can support you at it.
Thank you.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the challenges that you've faced as a writer. I want to leave storytellers who are listening to us with some inspiration on how to get past that writer's block.
For me, writer's block hasn't been too much of an issue. I think of the training of being in TV, where you just have to be like, I have to write the script. This is going on the air in like 6 weeks or whatever it is. Like, there's something to like forcing yourself to be creative. Like, you're like, this has to get made, and like, it's not like waiting for inspiration. You know, like making, like, it is a muscle and it is discipline, and like I feel like that training has made me really move like quickly and not be precious about things. Also, like, knowing that I can come up with like, when you get good at generating new ideas, like then you don't hold on so tightly to things, because you're like, I know I can beat this. I know I'll come up with another one. And that's kind of something that I think that was training from sitcom writing, which is like, we just got to get this on the air, and you need to come up with something.
How long do you usually have when you're writing a sitcom? Can you share with people? I know, but for people listening, the writer's room, like, from when you get the idea, how long for one episode?
I mean, it varies. I mean, ideally you want to give yourself a couple weeks. You have pre-production, but sometimes ideas get thrown out and you're literally like, we got to write this thing again over from scratch in a week or whatever it is, or like in this 5 days. And like, that's not ideal, but like, that could be a situation. I mean, it varies. So you have to be able to come up with stuff. Even like, as we were saying on Multicam, like, you, even on set, like, if a joke isn't working, you all have to rush in, the staff, and then pitch in the 5 minutes between takes to come up with a new joke for this actor. And so that kind of pressure and kind of need to be creative on demand, like, that was such a trial by fire that I think now I'm like, yeah, I can do it. I can do it if I have to. But yeah, I mean, obviously the other thing I would say, a challenge that I had was starting as a young writer. Like, I am very passionate, and I feel things strongly, and I think learning to kind of early on, like, learning to be like, hey, that's not my show. That's not, like, I have to let that go. That's their vision. Going with that, learning to navigate that, and trusting in the process. And then now that I'm like further in my career, I can be like, okay, well, I want it this way. But like, learning to be like, when to let go, how to take notes, you know what I mean? That whole thing was like a real thing. And also, I can't hide how I feel, and I can't laugh when I don't think something's real, and I can't say I like something when I don't like something. So I think learning that was a skill that, like, I didn't realize was part of being a writer.
Yeah. part of the whole process.
Yeah.
You talk with so much admiration about your director on Pixar, and now you're going to move on to directing your own. When you think about moving behind the camera, from the page to behind the camera, and I know that you've learned, I'm sure, on all the sets that you've been from watching a lot of these amazing individuals around you. Can you describe to our storytellers who maybe have just picked up a first pen and have visions of moving to directing, what is the process, or how does it differ from the way you approach your writing to the way you're now going to approach your directing? Does it differ? And if not, like, just explain. I would love you to just explain the way that your vision has changed from when you were a writer to now wanting to direct and get behind the camera.
You know, obviously the biggest difference between being a writer and the director is that the writer is almost like, you know, creating a blueprint, and then the director is building the house, you know? So that's kind of the analogy I would use. And so it's like, I was happy to be in the idea phase of being a writer and then outsourcing the execution phase to a director. But now I'm in a place where I realize so much can happen in the execution, like and to get it, have it done in a certain way, like it's almost like I was like, oh, I think I need to execute this myself. Not only in the sense that I'm like to get it right, but also just to, or the way I see it. But it was also like, for me, I think it's very intimidating sometimes to be like, oh, make the jump to director. But what was kind of eye-opening for me was realizing being a director is just having a point of view on everything, on every element, whether it's editing, casting, production design, like hairstyles, like. And I was like, oh, once I boiled it down to that, I'm like, oh yeah, I have a point of view, I have an opinion on all these things, and like, so that actually, all you need to be as a director is like have a creative vision that guides all these aspects. And then I think the thing that I think would be most challenging for me and not to learn is the talking with actors. I think that was a skill that I'm like, oh yeah, like. That's something that I think I've gotten better at over it, because that's not easy, like learning how to do that.
It's a whole nother language.
And it's managing people in a way that, like, as a writer, you don't, unless you're running a show. When you're a showrunner, you're kind of
then
doing
you have
that.
To do
Yeah. So obviously, yeah.
Tell me how does it feel? How does it feel to have gone from, you know, your childhood in upstate New York to this journey that you weren't expecting to take, and now to have a film that's Oscar nominated, to be working for Pixar, come full circle with Disney? What does that mean to you, and how does that feel?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm incredibly grateful. I know I worked really hard, but I also am like, wow, you know, this town, you know, it's like, you know, it is interesting. I have to say, like, there's so many variables that are outside of our control. Now, there is a lot of luck, but I do think if you have talent and you work hard, you actually, like, that's actually rare. It's really hard to find, like, good scripts, good writers, and
good talent that will work hard.
Yeah, and with the discipline to execute. And so I am I'm very grateful that I landed in this place, but I know that I took the ball and ran with it, and like, you know, and so it's been a really great journey, and I want to keep going, you know. So we'll see.
The people who make it in Hollywood are the people who want it more than anybody else, more than talent, more than anything else. It's that hard work that really pays off.
Yeah.
We are at a section of our show where I love to do a rapid fire. It is a little bit of a character analysis on you. So I asked you before the show what your favorite song was, and you picked one by Bjork. I love this. Tell me what it is about her music that really draws you.
I think I just really admire her as an artist because she's just doing her own thing. Like, she doesn't, you know what I mean? Like, I just in general love people who are unapologetically themselves. They're not trying, and they can't not be themselves. Like, I think that's a little bit me. And like, I don't think, and it's hard because, as I said, that's not always rewarded. It depends on the system you're in. But I love that she's that, and I can relate.
We'll see you in your swan dress, Cannes 2024.
I do love stuffed animals. So.
When I say the word home, what do you think of?
I think actually that's something that it resonates with me because my parents, as immigrant Chinese people, they valued their home. Like they didn't care about fancy cars or fancy clothes or like jewelry or whatever, like these other status symbols. They would always reinvest their money in like making the house nicer and making our backyard nicer. And it is important to me, like to have a place that feels beautiful and like your home.
Like your home.
Yeah.
What about the word heaven?
Heaven? Less significant. I think we were not raised super religious, so to me, I think heaven is. I mean, obviously, I think about it on a philosophical level, but it's not like something that I'm thinking about day to day or anything like that.
Well, what do you think of when I say the word hell?
Well, I can think of I would think of experiences that I'm like, oh my God, that was really rough. Like that was really hellish, that kind of thing.
What food do you find most comforting?
Oh, obviously Chinese food.
Any specific dish?
I mean, I feel like dumplings are a real comfort food. It's like really, like a.
Oh, I'll eat dumplings with you any day. Yeah. What is the sound that makes you smile?
Laughter, I think. Like other people laughing, I think, bringing joy and laughter is like super gratifying.
How do you define love?
Oh my God. What? These aren't like...
They're rapid fire. First thing comes to mind.
It's like, I think love is so important, and I think it encompasses obviously romantic and loving humanity. I think it's just something we should cultivate in ourselves, and not just in a romantic sense.
How do you define success?
I think success is something for me very personal, and it'd be like what I think I would define it as having creative control.
I love that. How do you describe or define failure?
I think failure is when things if something you try doesn't work. But I am also okay with failure in the sense that as long as you learn from that mistake or whatever it was, like that's how you grow. And it's painful and it should be painful, but I think we have to be okay with some failure.
Do you believe in magic?
Not really. I think I'm too sensible Asian-y. But I do admit, I think there's things about the world that we can't know. So yes, I believe in there's something out there, whether it's spiritual or whatever, magic or whatever you want to call it. I do believe in that.
That was a yes/no, ladies and gentlemen.
It was a no yes. It was no yes.
No yes.
It was a no and yes.
So what about second chances?
Oh, I definitely believe in second chances. I think we live in a world where I feel like with cancel culture, it's sadly not about second chances. And I think we should always give people a path to redemption, like if it's sincere, if there's a sincere apology and a want to learn. Because I think a lot of mistakes are made out of ignorance.
Yep.
And I mean, that's not okay, but it's that you learn and then you hopefully don't make that mistake again. So I hope we can be in a world where there's second chances.
What about love at first sight?
That I will say...
Give me that first script. I want to read it.
I would say there probably is love at first sight, but I don't think there's only one love.
Without considering time, ability, or money as an obstacle, if you were going to do one other thing, or create one other thing, or study one other thing, what would it be? I'm kind of entrepreneurial. My parents were, entrepreneurs, and I would love to start a business that solves a problem for society. That's what I would like to do. I love that. Who or what would you like to create a story for? With whom or what? That you haven't already.
I guess. I think I would like to do something about my Chinese family. I've pitched that. I've written pilots, but I feel like that
I actually love the strict dad who turns into a war hero, whatever, the detective. I love this.
Yeah, well, in some capacity, I want to tap into my family stuff because I think there's a lot there that I haven't yet, made into something into content.
I'm excited for that. What word best describes you as a storyteller?
This is going to be a cheat. I think I love character-driven, married with high concept.
Okay. What inspires or drives you?
Life, I think. I think it's really important as a creator to make output. You need input. And I like to get input from life, like living life, having experiences, meeting people, talking to people, and I get the funniest jokes, ideas, whatever from life.
Yeah, I have a notepad. I write down one-liners all the time.
Yeah.
Last question, Brenda. What is your favorite story?
Oh my gosh. Favorite story. I'm not a big favorites person. There's things I love.
First thing that comes to mind.
Do you mean like a book?
Could be a bedtime story. It could be row, row, row your boat. I don't know. First story. Favorite story.
What's it called? I really love this book that actually I think is Jeff Bezos. It's one of Jeff Bezos' favorite books.
No way.
Yeah, it's Remains of the Day.
Okay.
And they made it into a movie, but I love a repressed love story, and it's this real repressed love story.
Wanting to read that script more? Anybody else?
Yeah. And so but it's funny. It was very surprising that it was one of Jeff Bezos' favorite books.
It's okay for me. Every day it's something different.
Yeah.
I was thinking about Ricky Tikki Tumbo just a second ago.
Okay.
Okay. So this is a game, Brenda.
Oh.
Remember how you play categories?
Yeah, you have to name a category.
You have to say something on the snap.
And that's not how you place categories. Categories is the one you write the thing down, right?
Okay. This is how we played categories growing up, where you go, you would say favorite bird, and you'd be like, cardinal, blue jay.
Okay.
And you have to say it on the beat.
Oh.
And so we're going to try to do it, and we're going to try to name Pixar movies. And I'm laughing because I'm not going to be able to do it
So we're just going to try to see how many we can go.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're going to see how many we can go.
So do we alternate?
Yes, we alternate.
Okay.
So I'll go first, and then you go, and just say it on the snap.
Okay.
And I'm going to be so bad at this, guys. Okay, ready? Categories. Pixar movies. Cars.
Up.
Incredibles.
Toy Story.
Incredibles 2.
Toy Story 2.
What's the Buzz Lightyear movie called?
Lightyear.
I've already failed, guys. Brenda was going to kick my butt at this
I feel like we started
How many
getting
can you name?
We also got into the sequel, hole. So I feel like we can name I feel like I should name
Ratatouille, is that Pixar?
Ratatouille is one of them. It's great. Inside Out. Coco.
Oh, Soul.
Good
The one about
Dinosaur. There's a lot
Good
of them.
Dinosaur.
That was Peter Sohn directed that before this one.
It's so horrible. I can't name it my Pixar.
It's okay. It's okay. I love that you picked a category that you knew you would.
I would fail at. Brenda, we want to thank you so much for being with us today on Storyteller Studio.
Thanks for having me.